So today I'm going to talk about integration tests, and I'll begin by explaining why we might want to test. So I was playing a couple of days ago with a game that I'm making, um, and I was just trying out a new feature I had implemented, and just by coincidence, I discovered that I had introduced a bug that I had already fixed. So that's what made me think, okay, maybe it's time to start writing tests. And there's something interesting there, which is that there may be some projects that or some situations in which you might be okay without writing tests, but in my experience, once a project evolves a couple of weeks, or maybe you can measure it in terms of how many features, once you have like, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8 features and keep on adding features on top of the existing ones, as you modify the code, it's really brittle to test manually because, first of all, it takes time, so you end up going much slower, and second, uh, it's very error prone. So you might think that you tested everything and the game is working, and some subtle bugs might slip through the cracks. So that was what was happened to me the other day. I was playing with the game, just testing it out, playing a little bit because I was having fun, and I discovered that I had reintroduced a bug. Um, Another important thing to say about this is that having tests, automatic tests, is what allows you to keep on refactoring your code and keep on having a code base with good shape. Otherwise, you will be scared of improving your code. You will be scared of touching it because you might break anything whenever you touch it. And it's really bad for the code to be scared to touch it, because the code base should be something flexible, something that you can evolve constantly, something that you can refactor, you can uh, find better ways to express what you want to express. And if you have a good test suite that covers your back alongside, that's a very valuable thing to have. So, summing up, it's either you test manually because it makes sense, because it's a very simple and small thing, or in my experience, once you have, I don't know, maybe 5, maybe 10 features, it makes more sense to start adding tests. Now, why integration tests? I mean, there are many types of tests. There are unit tests, there are integration tests, end-to-end tests. You can even count static analysis such as ESLint or TypeScript as some sort of test, also manual tests. But why integration? The reason I chose to start by writing integration tests is that if you get them right, you can get a lot of value from a few tests. That doesn't mean the lower level tests don't make sense. They do make sense, obviously, especially unit tests, but with integration tests, you can get sure that like the overall thing works, and once you have that, you can go into a lower level and check the details of every part. But if you don't have something that tests that everything integrates together, you will be stuck by manually testing everything every time. And again, that is really an uncomfortable place to be in. So I decided to start writing integration tests, which, as you will see, they are sort of integration end-to-end-ish tests. They are not just testing the integration between a couple of things. They are pretty high level and testing the entire game. And there's another reason, very important reason in my experience, about why I chose to write integration tests, which is that the higher level the tests are, the more freedom you will have to change your code without the tests being affected. And that is absolute gold. Because if every time you refactor your code, your tests break, they don't give you a lot of assurance that the code is still working, because the tests break and you have to fix them. I mean, it's always better to have that than nothing, but having a test suite that doesn't break when you refactor your code and only break if you mess it up when you refactor is super, super important, super, super valuable. So that's another very important reason why I chose to start by integration tests. Again, not saying you're not going to use unit tests or lower level tests. Those are really important for testing like edge cases and all the nitty-gritty details of a piece of your application, but having high-level tests that allow you to refactor the architecture, the distribution, the responsibilities of your different parts of your code base is super, super important. So let's move on to see how I implemented them. Okay, so what I used for writing the tests is Vitest as the test runner, because I'm already using Vit for building the app. And I thought that I might give Vitest a try. I heard good reviews about it. So first thing that I did was add Vitest to the mix. So here, Vitest, just installed it following the instructions on the official docs, and that was it. It was really, really easy to install. But that was not the only thing that I needed. I needed to add a way to have a DOM available. If you go to Vitest and search for DOM, let's see, or JS DOM. So basically you can use either Happy DOM or JS DOM. I had never used Happy DOM, but checked the differences, and it turns out that Happy DOM is a little bit faster and JS DOM is a little bit more realistic in terms of mocking the DOM. However, since I hadn't used Happy DOM, I decided to try it out, and it worked. It worked, and also since it's smaller and faster, I said, okay, if it's good for what I need, if it works for my use case, I will go with Happy DOM. If not, I can always move to JS DOM, and it will probably work. However, Happy DOM did the trick, so really easy to install as well. You follow the instructions, install it, and set the environment to Happy DOM, and then everything, like you will have a document, a window available in your tests. What else? Well, since it was the first time I was working with Happy DOM, and this is something that I usually like to have, a sanity test. I always have a sanity test for my projects in which I just have an expect true to be true. Then I created a test that says it works with the DOM, in which I create an element and so on. And that I have a window object, because if this doesn't work, nothing will work later on. So I wanted to make sure that I got these couple of things right. After this, I jumped into writing the integration tests themselves. And this is pretty interesting. There are a couple of details about how I did this. Because first of all, the decision that I had to make was how to manage the interdependence between the tests. As a general rule, it's always a good practice to make sure that your tests are completely independent. That means that all your mocks, everything is absolutely reset between tests. So it doesn't really matter the outcome of one test to the outcome of another test. They are completely independent. Technically, you could even run them in parallel, and everything should be all right. However, in this case, turns out that Vit, when you are mocking the DOM, doesn't reset or doesn't initialize a new instance of the DOM mock per test. It does initialize a new instance per test file. So that got me thinking, and I thought, okay, given this is a pretty much high level test, it might make sense to make each of the tests run one after the other and sort of tell a story about how the game has to work. And that way, I don't have to reset the DOM every time. I can just spin up the game, test it in the same way I would test it by hand, but do it automatically. And once I finish, okay, that's it. And remember, these are not a lot of tests that we're talking about. They are like just very specific high level tests that we want to have so that we can cover a very wide range of high level things. We can always go into details with lower level tests. That's always possible and actually recommended. So resuming how I did this, I was saying that I first start by mounting the application. So this is pretty interesting because with HappyDOM or JSDOM, you have a document which is like a mock of the DOM. So what I did was first create a variable called main element, which is of type HTML element, and then I create an element, in this case main, and I start my application with that element as the element that receives. In my application, I have to pass the root element for it to render inside. And once I have that, I start testing one thing after the other. For example, test starts at the top left corner. So I find by text snake warriors. I do this to actually I could even refactor this. For example, test renders title, and then let's refactor live. There we go. Async is not necessary anymore here. So that's it. Let's run the tests. Run test integration. There we go. Excellent. And something really important that I always do is whenever I modify a test, I just quickly break the code to avoid getting false positives, which is a test that passes when the code is broken. So a very simple way to fix or to detect that is to break the code. So in this case, what I'm doing is finding this Snake Warriors code, Snake Warriors text. So let's say I remove the S at the end. If I save and run the tests again, it fails right away. And let's check it fails for the right reason. Here, yeah. Renders a title, fails, unable to find an element with the text Snake Warriors, so on and so forth. So that's what we want. Go back to Snake Warriors and run again. and everything passes. Now, let's talk about find by text. What is this? This comes from testing library DOM, which is like the core library from the testing library suite. The most common one is probably React testing library, but React testing library is just a wrapper on top of testing library DOM. Angular testing library is a wrapper, and so on. And one of the most important things that the wrappers do is this piece here, basically creating an element in the document. Sorry, not in the document, but using the document to create an element and then rendering things inside. It gives you a render function. In this case, I don't have it. I have to render things by myself, but that's exactly what I'm doing. I have my main class from my application that when I instantiate it in the constructor, everything gets initialized, and one of the things that happens is that control is given to React, and React takes care of rendering the app whenever it has to be rendered, or yeah, that's a problem of the app. And I'm not even aware React is present here. And that's, in my opinion, that's a very cool thing, because I could technically change React, take it out, and everything, I mean, my tests would keep on working. And then I check that it starts at the top left corner. So what I mean by that is that when you start the game, the snake starts at the top left corner. So what I'm doing to test that is to expect that the cell color 00, 01, 02 is green, and 03 is off, let's call it. And this is a small little function that I wrote to help me get the tests easier to read. And in this case, for example, if I decide that I'm interested on understanding how the cell color works, I can just come and click there and read the code. It's at the bottom of this file. So cell color receives a row and a call, and then uses get by test ID and gets the cell with the row and the column here, and returns the style background color. That's it. But you don't need to care about these low-level details when you read this. You can read this, keep on going, and later on, if you are interested, you can check what this helper function does. That is like one of the pillars of clean code, keeping one level of abstraction per area of your code base. So all these tests have the same level of abstractions. They talk about expecting something to be of a certain color, and that something is whatever cell color at some position returns. What else? One more thing about testing library DOM. I could have used just query selectors from the DOM. What I mean by that is doing like main el.query selector and search for a test ID and so on. But DOM testing library gives us many small things that are pretty useful. For example, find by text here. Maybe the name is not the best, but find by text, what it does is tries to find something, but it keeps on trying until it finds it, obviously with a timeout. That's pretty cool because, for example, if I changed this, let's say I change this and I do, instead of find by text, I do get by text. Get tries just one more time, and if it's not there, it fails. So let me just save and run this again. It fails. It fails because the code was not yet rendered. We didn't give time to the application to render, so it cannot find Snake Warriors, the title Snake Warriors there, because it's not yet there. So what we do with find by text is in a very simple way, we just keep on waiting until the thing that we're trying to find appears. So I run it again and it works. And then how does this keep on going? Then moves right when the game starts. So what I do is fire an event, a mouse down event on the start button, this button. And this is pretty cool because you can sort of decide what tests to write by looking at the UI of your app. And that means that you have a very high level test, and it's really nice. So as I was saying, I press on the start button, and then I use the wait for utility function that comes with DOM testing library to wait until the color of the fourth cell turns green. Take into account that in this test it began like turned off. As you can see here, the fourth cell is not green. And then what I do is wait until it turns green, which means it is effectively moving to the right. And then, well, we can keep on going. It crashes into the right wall. So what I do is wait until I get the game over text. I just had to set the timeout to 2 seconds because it takes a little while to get to the end of the grid. Basically, what I'm doing is this: waiting until I see game over. And this, I think it's really nice because you sort of end up testing very close to what you would test manually. Very close, or even like the exact same thing. That's really nice. So I went until it shows game over, and I checked that the color of the last cell, I mean this one here, is green. What I'm doing is checking that the snake got there. And then I test that we restart and see what happens. For example, here I'm pressing on the restart button, and then I'm waiting for this cell here to be green. I just added a comment. I mean, it's just a detail, but when you press restart, thanks to the tests, I discovered that when I restart, the snake starts not at the left, but one square to the right, which makes sense because of how the game is working. Maybe I change it later on, but that's another side effect of writing tests. You get like to catch small little things that otherwise you might have not caught, and that makes your overall code like more robust in some sense. So one more thing is to notice is like how these tests tell a story. I mean, it starts by rendering a title, then starts at the top left corner, moves right, crashes, then restarts, and then I have other tests here that I want to write. Haven't yet written them, but my idea is to keep on adding tests until I get a general overview of how the game works. Something I didn't say, but I should probably also add about integration tests is that they also give you a lot of value in the sense of if you don't, for any reason, maybe you don't have the luxury of writing unit tests, integration tests, end-to-end tests, and everything, having a good suite of high enough level tests give you a lot of value with few tests, and that's pretty good as well. But again, if you can write lower level tests, it's very good. That's something that you should definitely do. The point is that what I end up getting from this is a test suite that right now takes 15 seconds to run. Sorry, no, not 15 seconds, 2 seconds. Let me run them again. So just in 2 seconds, I get a lot of stuff tested. Otherwise, I should like reload here, start, wait for this to crash, check that game over appears, and then restart and check the snake goes to the left and so on. I mean, it's not that terrible, but it's super manual, and if you can automate it, it's much better. You can even put it in CI or whatever, and you get a lot of value from that. So definitely recommend it. Okay, so that's it for integration tests. I hope I was able to explain how you can write tests that give you a lot of value without the need of having to write a lot of them. Also, if you like this type of content, subscribe for more. And if you have any comments about this, leave me a comment.